The rancher gave food to a widow with 2 children. The next morning, a wagon of supplies blocked his gate. The wagon wheels groaned under impossible weight as dawn broke across the Montana plains. Samuel Hayes stood frozen at his ranch gate, coffee mug trembling in weathered hands. What blocked his path defied every rule he knew about the unforgiving frontier. Yesterday had been different. Yesterday, he was just another struggling rancher counting coins that barely existed, wondering how to stretch winter supplies until spring trading season. The drought had claimed half his cattle, and creditors circled like vultures over sun-bleached bones. But yesterday, he had made a choice that would change everything. The memory burned fresh in his mind. Eleanor Whitman had appeared at his door like a ghost from his past, her face hollow with hunger, 2 small children clinging to her tattered dress. Her husband had died in the copper mines 3 months prior, leaving nothing but debts and broken promises. Samuel had watched her struggle to form words, pride battling desperation in eyes that once sparkled with hope. The children, barely old enough to understand their circumstances, gazed up at him with the trust only innocence could muster. Without hesitation, he had filled their arms with everything he could spare: flour, salt pork, preserved vegetables, dried beans. His own winter stores, carefully rationed for survival, suddenly seemed abundant when measured against their need. Now, as morning light revealed the mysterious wagon train stretching beyond his gate, Samuel wondered if kindness in this harsh land came with consequences he never imagined. The lead wagon bore no markings, its canvas cover concealing contents that made the sturdy frame sag with burden. Behind it, a dozen more wagons formed a line that disappeared into the morning mist. No drivers were visible, no horses or oxen in sight. They simply existed, as if materialized from the very air. Samuel set down his coffee and approached cautiously. The frontier had taught him that anything unusual meant potential danger. His hand instinctively moved to the Colt revolver at his hip, though something deep in his gut told him this was different. The canvas flap of the first wagon hung loose, revealing stacks of grain sacks, barrels of molasses, and crates marked with symbols he did not recognize. Quality goods that would cost a fortune in any frontier town. His experienced eye cataloged supplies worth more than his ranch had ever produced. A piece of paper fluttered from the wagon's edge, caught by the morning breeze. Samuel grabbed it before it could escape, unfolding what appeared to be a bill of lading written in precise handwriting. For Samuel Hayes, Montana Territory. Payment in full for services rendered. No signature required. The words made no sense. He had rendered no services worthy of such payment. His mind raced through recent transactions, business dealings, favors owed, or debts collected. Nothing justified this windfall. Movement caught his eye. Eleanor Whitman approached on foot, her children walking beside her with renewed energy. The hollow look had vanished from their faces, replaced by something Samuel had not seen in months on the frontier: genuine hope. "Mr. Hayes," Eleanor called out, her voice stronger than yesterday's whisper, "I wanted to thank you properly for your kindness." Samuel studied her face, searching for any connection to the mysterious wagons. "Eleanor, did you have anything to do with this?" She looked genuinely puzzled as she surveyed the wagon train. "I have never seen such a sight. What is all this?" "That is what I am trying to understand." The children ran ahead, marveling at the wagons with the fearless curiosity of youth. Their laughter echoed across the plains, a sound that had become rare in these harsh times. Samuel walked the length of the wagon train, Eleanor beside him. Each wagon contained different supplies: tools, lumber, fabric, medicines, even livestock feed. Everything a struggling ranch needed to survive and prosper. "This cannot be coincidence," Samuel muttered, more to himself than to Eleanor. "Perhaps," Eleanor said softly, "there are forces in this world we do not understand, forces that reward goodness when it seems impossible to maintain." Samuel had lived too long on the frontier to believe in fairy tales, yet the evidence surrounded him. The wagons were real, solid, filled with tangible goods that could transform his failing ranch into something prosperous. As they reached the final wagon, Samuel noticed something that made his blood freeze. Carved into the wooden side, barely visible beneath layers of trail dust, were initials, EW-1873. Eleanor saw them too. Her face went pale as she traced the letters with trembling fingers. "My husband's initials," she whispered. "Edward Whitman. But that is impossible. He died 3 months ago." Samuel felt the world shift beneath his feet. The frontier was full of coincidences, but this transcended rational explanation. The year carved into the wood was current, the craftsmanship fresh despite the aged appearance. "Eleanor, what exactly did your husband do before the mining work?" She hesitated, as if the words carried weight she was reluctant to share. "He was a freight contractor, specialized in difficult deliveries across dangerous territory. He had connections with trading companies from San Francisco to St. Louis." Pieces began forming a picture Samuel was not sure he wanted to complete. What kind of connections? Edward never spoke details about his business. Said it was safer that way, but he always insisted that debts of honor were more binding than any legal contract. The implications hit Samuel like a physical blow. Edward Whitman had somehow arranged this delivery before his death, triggered by an act of kindness toward his widow. A debt of honor that transcended the grave. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of wonder rather than grief. "He told me once that good deeds create echoes that travel further than we can imagine. I thought it was just his way of encouraging charity." Samuel examined the wagon contents more carefully now, seeing them with new understanding. These were not random supplies, but carefully chosen items that addressed every specific need his ranch faced. Someone with intimate knowledge of his situation had curated this delivery. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the mist and revealing the full scope of the gift. Conservative estimates put the value at thousands of dollars, enough to secure his ranch for years and provide Eleanor with the fresh start her family desperately needed. "What do we do now?" Eleanor asked, her voice barely audible above the prairie wind. Samuel considered the question seriously. The frontier operated on unwritten codes of honor, and refusing such a gift would be as grave an insult as accepting unearned charity. But this was neither charity nor unearned. It was something else entirely. "We honor the intention," he said finally. "Your husband arranged this because he believed kindness should be rewarded. We accept it in that spirit." They spent the morning unloading wagons, sorting supplies, and marveling at the quality of everything provided. The children helped with enthusiasm, turning necessary work into an adventure. Their laughter became the soundtrack of transformation. By afternoon, the empty wagons had vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared. No drivers materialized to claim them. No animals returned to pull them away. They simply were no longer there, as if the frontier itself had absorbed them back into legend. Samuel and Eleanor stood in his transformed ranch yard, surrounded by abundance that had materialized from a single act of compassion. The implications would take time to fully process, but the immediate reality was undeniable. "Your husband was a remarkable man," Samuel said, meaning every word. Eleanor smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her since Edward's death. He always said the frontier rewards those who remember their humanity. As evening approached, Samuel prepared a meal using provisions from the mysterious delivery. The irony was not lost on him that he had given away his winter stores yesterday and received a year's worth of supplies in return. Eleanor helped with cooking, their conversation flowing naturally as they worked together. The children played nearby, their voices creating a warmth that the harsh frontier rarely allowed. "I have been thinking," Eleanor said as they sat down to eat, "about what happens next." Samuel nodded, understanding her uncertainty. The frontier offered few options for widows with young children, even with sudden prosperity. "This ranch is too large for one person to manage properly," he said carefully, "and too isolated for a family to work alone. The suggestion hung between them, unspoken but understood. Partnership born of necessity could grow into something more meaningful, given time and mutual respect. Eleanor met his eyes directly. Edward would approve. He always said the strongest foundations are built on shared struggles and mutual aid. The decision felt natural, inevitable even. Two struggling survivors combining resources and resolve to build something neither could achieve alone. The mysterious wagon delivery had provided the means, but the will to persevere had always been present. Over the following weeks, they established routines that maximized their combined strengths. Eleanor proved surprisingly skilled at ranch management, while Samuel's experience with cattle and land development complemented her organizational abilities. The children adapted quickly to ranch life, finding joy in responsibilities that connected them to the land their father had died trying to provide for them. Their presence transformed the isolated homestead into something resembling a real home. Samuel often found himself watching Eleanor work, noting how grief had carved strength from sorrow. She had endured losses that would have broken weaker people, yet emerged with grace intact and determination renewed. One evening, as they reviewed ranch accounts by lamplight, Eleanor spoke the words that had been building between them for weeks. I think Edward knew this would happen. Not the details, but the outcome. He arranged those wagons not just to reward your kindness, but to create the possibility of something better for all of us. Samuel considered her words carefully. The mysterious delivery had indeed created possibilities that extended far beyond mere survival. It had established the foundation for a future neither of them could have imagined alone. Perhaps some debts of honor transcend individual understanding, he replied. Perhaps the frontier itself has mechanisms we cannot fully comprehend. Spring arrived early, bringing with it confirmation that their partnership was succeeding beyond all expectations. The ranch prospered under their combined management, and the children grew strong and confident in their new environment. Samuel's relationship with Eleanor deepened naturally, built on shared respect, common purpose, and genuine affection that grew from working side by side through challenges both expected and surprising. The mysterious wagon delivery became local legend, told and retold in frontier towns with embellishments that grew more elaborate with each telling. But for those who lived the reality, the truth was simple. Kindness had been rewarded in ways that defied conventional explanation. Years later, when other struggling families appeared at their door, Samuel and Eleanor never hesitated to share what they had received. They understood now that abundance multiplies when divided among those in genuine need. The ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where desperate families could find temporary refuge and practical assistance. Not charity, but the kind of mutual aid that frontier survival demanded. Samuel often wondered if Edward Whitman had foreseen this outcome when he arranged his mysterious final delivery. Perhaps the true debt of honor was not simply rewarding one act of kindness, but ensuring that kindness continued to echo through future generations. The frontier remained harsh and unforgiving, but within the boundaries of their ranch, Eleanor and Samuel had created something precious, proof that human decency could not only survive in the wilderness but actually flourish under the right conditions. Their success attracted attention from neighboring ranchers, many of whom had initially been skeptical of the partnership between a widowed woman and a bachelor rancher. But results spoke louder than gossip, and their methods were soon adopted by others facing similar challenges. The children grew into capable adults who understood that prosperity carried obligations to those less fortunate. They had learned by example that strength comes, not from hoarding resources, but from sharing them wisely with others who demonstrate genuine need. Samuel and Eleanor married 2 years after the mysterious wagon delivery in a ceremony attended by dozens of families they had helped during their partnership. The wedding became a celebration not just of their union but of the community values they had fostered. On their wedding night, as they stood together on the porch overlooking land that had been transformed from struggling survival into thriving abundance, Eleanor shared one final secret about her late husband. "Edward left me a letter to be opened only if I remarried. I read it today." Samuel waited, understanding that some revelations required careful timing. He wrote that he had arranged for the wagon delivery to be triggered by any act of significant kindness shown to his family. He believed that anyone willing to sacrifice their own security for our welfare would prove worthy of the prosperity those supplies could provide. The revelation added another layer to the mystery, but also provided a satisfying completeness to the story. Edward Whitman had created a test of character that revealed not just generosity, but the kind of sustained commitment necessary for frontier success. He was testing my character, Samuel realized. He was ensuring his family's future by identifying someone whose values aligned with his own, Eleanor corrected gently. The test revealed what was already present in your heart. As stars emerged over the Montana plains, Samuel reflected on the strange chain of events that had begun with a simple decision to share his winter supplies with a desperate family. That choice had seemed like the end of his own security, but instead had become the beginning of prosperity beyond his wildest frontier dreams. The mysterious wagon delivery remained unexplained in practical terms, but its purpose had been fulfilled completely. Kindness had been rewarded, families had been united, and a thriving community had emerged from individual acts of compassion. Sometimes the frontier rewarded those who remembered their humanity in ways that transcended ordinary understanding. Samuel Hayes had learned that lesson in the most profound way possible, and spent the rest of his life ensuring that others had opportunities to learn it as well. The ranch prospered for generations, becoming a symbol throughout the territory that success built on mutual aid and genuine compassion could withstand any hardship the wilderness might present. And always, the story of the mysterious wagon delivery was told to remind future generations that debts of honor create echoes that travel much further than anyone can imagine. The winter following their marriage brought the harshest blizzards Montana had seen in decades. Snow piled 15 feet high against the barn walls, and temperatures dropped so low that water froze solid inside heated cabins. Other ranches throughout the territory suffered devastating losses as cattle died by the hundreds and families burned furniture to stay warm. But Samuel and Eleanor's ranch weathered the crisis with remarkable resilience. The mysterious supplies had included not just immediate necessities but also specialized equipment perfectly suited for extreme weather survival. Heavy woolen blankets that seemed to generate their own warmth, preserved foods that retained nutritional value despite months of storage, and heating stoves designed with efficiency that maximized every piece of fuel. During the worst weeks of the storm, desperate neighbors appeared at their door almost daily. Families with frostbitten children, ranchers who had lost everything to the brutal cold, travelers stranded by impassable roads. Without exception, Samuel and Eleanor welcomed them all. Their home became an unofficial refuge center, with families sleeping in shifts throughout the large cabin that had somehow expanded to accommodate everyone in need. The children helped organize sleeping areas and distribute warm clothing, learning firsthand that abundance shared multiplies rather than diminishes. Eleanor proved particularly skilled at managing the logistics of feeding and housing dozens of people with limited resources. She organized cooking schedules, rationed supplies with mathematical precision, and somehow ensured that everyone received adequate nutrition despite the overwhelming demand. Samuel spent his days breaking ice on water sources, checking on livestock, and venturing into the storm to rescue stranded travelers. The mysterious supply delivery had included specialized winter gear that allowed him to work effectively in conditions that would have been impossible to survive otherwise. One particularly fierce night, as wind howled around the cabin with supernatural intensity, a knock came at the door so faint it was barely audible above the storm. Samuel opened it to find a figure so covered in ice and snow that gender and age were impossible to determine. "Please," came a voice weak with exhaustion. "My family. Wagon overturned 2 miles east. 3 children. Without hesitation, Samuel gathered rescue equipment and ventured into the blizzard. The mysterious winter gear functioned perfectly, keeping him warm and providing visibility in conditions that should have been fatal. Following barely visible tracks, he located the overturned wagon and discovered a family of 5 huddled together in a snow cave they had desperately constructed. The father was unconscious from cold exposure, the mother barely conscious, and 3 small children crying with exhaustion and fear. Samuel managed to transport all 5 back to the ranch in multiple trips, each journey testing the limits of human endurance. Eleanor immediately organized medical care, warming the family gradually to prevent shock while treating frostbite and exposure symptoms. The mysterious supplies had included medical equipment and medicines that proved essential for saving lives that night. The rescued family was the Morrison clan, traveling from Colorado to establish a homestead near Billings. They had been caught unprepared by the sudden intensity of the storm and would certainly have died without intervention. Their gratitude was profound, but Samuel and Eleanor treated their rescue as simply what neighbors do for neighbors on the frontier. As spring finally arrived and the massive snowdrifts began melting, the true scope of the winter's devastation became apparent. Entire ranches had been abandoned, families had relocated to distant cities, and the territorial economy faced collapse from widespread livestock losses. But communities that had received aid from Samuel and Eleanor's ranch during the crisis emerged stronger than before. Families who had been strangers became lasting allies, sharing resources and coordinating efforts to rebuild what the winter had destroyed. The Morrison family decided to establish their homestead adjacent to Samuel's ranch, becoming the first of many neighbors who chose proximity to people they knew they could depend upon during difficult times. This began a pattern of community development that transformed the isolated ranch into the nucleus of a thriving settlement. Eleanor suggested they formalize their assistance efforts by creating what she called a mutual aid society. Member families would contribute resources during good times and receive support during emergencies, creating a network of mutual insurance that provided security no individual family could achieve alone. The concept proved so successful that neighboring settlements began adopting similar systems. Within 5 years, a network of mutual aid societies stretched across Montana Territory, providing coordinated disaster relief and economic stability that helped entire regions survive periodic hardships. Samuel often reflected on how Edward Whitman's mysterious final gift had initiated changes that extended far beyond their individual ranch. The wagon delivery had provided not just supplies but the foundation for community structures that strengthened everyone involved. The ranch's reputation for reliability and generosity attracted skilled workers, seeking long-term employment rather than seasonal labor. Craftsmen, teachers, and merchants established permanent residences nearby, creating the economic diversity necessary for a genuine town rather than just an isolated ranch. Eleanor took particular interest in education, using part of their prosperity to establish a school that served children from dozens of surrounding families. She had recognized that frontier survival required not just physical strength, but also intellectual development that prepared young people for changing times. The schoolhouse became another community gathering point, hosting town meetings, social events, and religious services that bound the growing settlement together with shared experiences and common purposes. Eleanor often taught classes herself, sharing knowledge she had acquired through extensive reading and practical experience. Samuel expanded the ranch operations to include specialized services that other ranchers needed but could not provide individually. Equipment repair, veterinary care, financial advice, and complex negotiations with distant markets became additional sources of income that benefited the entire community. Their success attracted attention from territorial officials who recognized the settlement's potential, importance for regional development. Government contracts for mail delivery, military supply, and infrastructure development brought additional prosperity while maintaining the community's independence and self-reliance. The mysterious wagon delivery had become legendary throughout the territory, inspiring countless variations and embellishments in the telling. But for Samuel and Eleanor, the true miracle was not the unexplained arrival of supplies, but the ongoing multiplication of benefits that resulted from using those gifts wisely. 10 years after the wagons appeared, their settlement had grown into an incorporated town with elected officials, established businesses, and a reputation for honest dealing that attracted trade from hundreds of miles away. The prosperity was shared broadly rather than concentrated in few hands, creating stability that benefited everyone. Samuel and Eleanor had 4 children of their own by then, plus several adopted orphans who had been taken in during various crises. All the children learned the same lessons about mutual aid, community responsibility, and the multiplication of abundance when shared generously with those in genuine need. The original ranch house had been expanded multiple times to accommodate their growing family and frequent guests. But the most important addition was a large meeting hall where community decisions were made collectively and disputes were resolved through discussion rather than violence. Eleanor established a lending library that became one of the largest in the territory, providing educational resources that helped develop the intellectual infrastructure necessary for continued growth and adaptation to changing circumstances. Samuel organized cooperative purchasing arrangements that allowed small ranchers to buy supplies at prices previously available only to large operations. This leveled economic advantages and ensured that prosperity was accessible to families with modest resources but strong work ethics. Their town became known throughout the West as a place where people could rebuild their lives after disasters, receive fair treatment regardless of their background, and contribute their skills to something larger than individual survival. The mutual aid society model spread to other territories and eventually influenced federal policies regarding disaster relief and community development. Eleanor was invited to speak at territorial conferences about successful cooperation strategies that strengthened rather than weakened individual initiative. Samuel served multiple terms as mayor, always emphasizing that leadership meant facilitating community decisions rather than imposing individual will. His approach proved so effective that other towns sent representatives to observe their democratic processes and adapt successful methods to their own circumstances. The mysterious Edward Whitman was honored with a monument in the town square, recognizing his role in initiating the chain of events that created their thriving community. The inscription read simply, "Edward Whitman." His final gift created echoes that continue to strengthen this community. As Samuel and Eleanor aged, they took great satisfaction in seeing their children and adopted children assume leadership roles throughout the territory. The values they had learned through experience were being passed to future generations who would face new challenges, requiring the same fundamental principles. The original ranch remained operational under their children's management, but had evolved far beyond simple cattle raising to become a diversified agricultural and business enterprise that provided economic stability for hundreds of families. Eleanor often said that the most important lesson from their experience was that prosperity means little unless it creates opportunities for others to achieve their own version of success. The mysterious wagon delivery had demonstrated this principle in the most dramatic way possible. Samuel always insisted that the real mystery was not how the wagons had appeared, but why more people did not recognize that helping others invariably resulted in receiving help when it was needed most. The frontier taught harsh lessons, but the most important one was that survival required community. Their story became required reading in territorial schools, not as fantasy but as practical instruction about the mechanisms that transform individual struggle into collective prosperity. Children learn that mysterious events often have simple explanations rooted in human kindness and forward-thinking generosity. The town they had helped establish became the county seat when Montana achieved statehood, with Samuel serving as one of the first state legislators. His experience with community building and cooperative problem-solving proved valuable in crafting policies that strengthened local autonomy while maintaining state coherence. Eleanor was appointed to the State Education Board, where she advocated for curricula that emphasized practical skills alongside academic subjects. Her approach prepared students for productive lives whether they remained in rural communities or moved to expanding urban areas. Their influence extended beyond state boundaries as other regions adopted their methods for community development and mutual aid organization. What had begun with a mysterious wagon delivery had evolved into a model for democratic prosperity that strengthened American ideals throughout the expanding West. Samuel Hayes died peacefully at age 78, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and community members whose lives had been touched by his example. His funeral drew attendees from across the western states, testimony to the widespread impact of principles he had lived consistently for decades. Eleanor survived him by 6 years, continuing their work until her death at age 74. Her final words were reportedly, "Edward would be proud of what his gift accomplished." She was buried beside Samuel in the town cemetery, their shared headstone bearing Edward Whitman's initials alongside their own. The mysterious wagon delivery remained unexplained, but its effects continued for generations. The town prospered through economic depressions, world wars, and social changes that destroyed less adaptable communities. The foundation of mutual aid and shared prosperity proved resilient enough to survive any crisis. Modern descendants of the original settlers still gather annually to commemorate the wagon delivery and renew their commitment to principles that created their community. The celebration combines historical remembrance with practical planning for continued cooperation in addressing contemporary challenges. The ranch still operates as a family enterprise, though modern technology has transformed its methods. The fundamental values remain unchanged. Prosperity should be shared. Community strength comes from mutual aid, and individual success means little unless it contributes to collective welfare. Historians have attempted to document the logistics of Edward Whitman's mysterious final delivery, but records from that period are incomplete and often contradictory. What remains consistent is the testimony of multiple witnesses that the wagons appeared exactly as described and contained precisely the supplies needed for subsequent community development. Whether the delivery resulted from elaborate advance planning, fortunate coincidence, or something beyond ordinary understanding matters less than its demonstrated effects. The wagon delivery proved that acts of kindness create consequences that extend far beyond immediate circumstances and continue influencing events for generations. Samuel Hayes and Eleanor Whitman Hayes became legendary figures throughout the American West, symbols of the possibility that individual decency and community cooperation could triumph over the harsh realities of frontier existence. Their story inspired countless others to attempt similar experiments in cooperative prosperity. The town they helped establish still thrives today, its main street lined with businesses that reflect the same values of honest dealing and community service that characterized its founders. Visitors often comment on the unusual friendliness and mutual helpfulness that seem to characterize all aspects of local life. The mysterious wagon delivery had accomplished exactly what Edward Whitman apparently intended. It rewarded immediate kindness while creating the foundation for sustained prosperity based on principles that strengthened everyone involved. His debt of honor had been paid in full, with interest that continues compounding across generations.